من كاس السلام من كاس السلام كاس السلام mana أجمل من سلام mana أجمل من سلام mana أجمل من سلام.
Imam Feisal Abdul Rauf, he is by no means a newcomer. He's a solid, long-term, respected member of that community. Our conference celebrates the shared values of the three major Western religions, exemplified by the following three statements. Chronologically, first is that of Rabbi Hillel. That which is hateful to you, do not unto others. Second, the Christian. Do to others as you would have them do unto you. Third, the Muslim. You are believers when you want for your brother, sister, and neighbor what you want for yourself. The Imam's landmark publication, What's Right with Islam is What's Right with America, sets the tone for the entire conference.
Or Shia or Sufi or whatever, these designations do not impact the fundamental core. Belief in God. Muslims are required to believe in 5 articles of faith, called the Creed of Islam, and 5 pillars of action, which is called you might say, the acts of worship. We believe in the oneness of God, and there are a number of descriptions we must believe of God, that God is one, that God is almighty, that God is described by attributes of absoluteness and absolute perfection. We cannot say God is weak, God is ignorant, God is all-knowing, almighty, just, compassionate, etc. We have to believe in these attributes. In fact, there are 99 so-called attributes of God deemed to be divine names. The second thing we have to believe in is we have to believe in the angels. The angel Jibreel, Gabriel, Mikael, Michael, many angels, the angel of death, the collector of souls, and the angelic realm is something that we must believe in. We also must believe in the scriptures that God sent. And we are taught in the Quran to believe and accept not only the Quran, but prior scriptures, which are called the Torah, or the Injil, which is the Arabic word for angel, the Gospel of Jesus, and the Torah of Moses, and the Zabur, the Psalms of David, and other, what are called the Suhuf Ibrahim and Musa, other pages, literally. The word Suhuf means pages, that have come to other prophets such as Abraham and Moses, the tablets that were given to Moses. And we have to believe in the messengers. These are prophets who were sent by God to teach humankind about God's religion. We are taught, the Quran is very explicit, but there's no different religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. In fact, we are not finding in the Quran the word Judaism or the word Christianity. It speaks of Jews, it speaks of the Nazarenes, it speaks of the children of Israel, but it speaks of one faith, God's religion, Deen-Illah, the Quran says, God's religion, the religion of truth. So the obligation for us is to be godly, and that all these different revelations that God revealed are different ways, in different languages, in different liturgies of being godly. And therefore we can all practice our religion correctly and faithfully, or we can practice our religion falsely and hypocritically. And in fact, the hypocrites, it's called chapter the hypocrites. So we have to be very, very careful about hypocrisy in our religious practice. And we have to believe in what is called in our faith the last day, which refers to the end of the world, the day of resurrection, and the day of judgment, followed by heaven and hell, which altogether really is a description of human accountability for our own actions. We are accountable beings who shall be held accountable by God for our actions. That's the creed of Islam. Then we have the acts of worship, beginning with the testimony of faith, the declaration that we believe in God, that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. And we bear witness. Christians talk about witnessing or bearing witness a lot. So we're to bear witness to the truth of God, to the reality of God. That's the first practice of Islam. The second is to maintain regular prayer. And you saw us right now performing the fourth of the 5 daily prayers, the sunset prayer. The third is to give a charity or a kind of equivalent of the tithing practice, except we don't give a tenth, we're required to give 2.5%, a 40th, depending upon how our wealth is obtained. If it's through mining, it's as much as 1/5, 20%. It's like the tax code, so in the Islamic and it goes to the treasury, and it's to serve the benefits of the community. Then we fast the month of Ramadan, which is to abstain from food, drink, smoking, sexual activities from dawn, which is the beginning of the morning twilight, until sunset. And after sunset, we can eat and drink and make merry. Unless, of course, we are doing what's called a period of i'tikaf, kind of a retreat, in which then sex is avoided during that time. And the fifth of our pillars is the pilgrimage to Mecca, which has to be done once in one's lifetime. And these are you might say, the creative practice that is required of all of us. As long as you do that, you are accepted into the faith. Now, the difference between Sunni and Shia has to do with politics, and whether the leader of the community should be from the descendants of the Prophet or not. And this is what gave rise to the difference between Shia and Sunni, and it developed into some differences of theological interpretation. But even in Iran today, a Shia country, we have presidents who are not descendants of the Prophet, so power has its own priorities, so to speak. And then the term Sufi refers to the spiritual practice, because you can practice your faith in a way where like in my case, for example, I remember as a young boy I was taught to practice my religion. And then I remember when I was 10, 11, so 12 years old, in the secret position, one of the things that we say is we mention the declaration of faith. I bear witness that there is no God but God. And I remember having a problem with that. I would say, Faisal, you're a hypocrite. How can you bear witness to God when you haven't seen God, you haven't experienced God? So I remember one day I was asking my father, I said, Dad, isn't shahid, the root of shahid, means to see, to witness? He said, yes, Faisal. It doesn't ashhadu an la ilaha illallah mean that I have seen and have witnessed that there is no other God? He said, yes, Faisal. Dad, I haven't seen God yet. So it's this tension within me that propelled me on my spiritual search. I felt that somehow the very language, the very formulation of my religious practice required me to see God, to experience God. And that's when my father, friends of my father, introduced me to something that's called the Sufi literature, the spiritual literature. And then God graced me when I was about 14 years old, and I think God graces every human being at some point in his or her life. I was coming back from school one day. We had sports that afternoon. I was sitting in the bus, Kuala Lumpur to Kelang in Malaysia. And it was that time of late afternoon where the sun was very yellow. And I had a moment which I can only describe it as a moment where the boundaries of my ego, the boundaries of myself dissolved. And for what felt like a long minute, and a very beautiful minute, I felt a complete merging of consciousness, of selfness, with all of the cosmos. I felt at one with everything around yellowness of the afternoon sun, with the green of the leaves, the sound of that old bus with the diesel engine, the tear falls at the seat and to the seat next to me. I remember the moment distinctly, but most importantly, I felt I was actually in the presence of God. And I felt this enormous power of God and the enormous love and compassion of God. And that moment I knew that I was bearing witness to God. And our Sufi tradition, we have a saying that to the heart belongs an act of frustration. Bil-qalbi sajda. To the heart belongs an act of frustration. And when the heart commits that act, then it never rises from that act of frustration. So the Sufi practice, which is what Sufi and Shahad Sufi, are those who seek what we call in the Quran the face of God, who seek the experience of God, because it is that experience which transforms us, which completely recalibrates us and anchors us in the witnessing of God. Because once we do that, it changes our whole perspective. We begin to practice religion from the inside out, rather from the outside in. And many of us, including young Muslims, because I know this from my own experience, we want to be religious. We practice our religion from the outside in. It creates enormous stresses. It is false. It is not real. It is empty. And it's only when we are graced like this, what our Christian brothers call an act of divine grace, when we're graced by this experience of God smiling on us, that then we call it a touch of the Holy Spirit, if you like, then we truly are standing in the presence of God. And then our religious practice begins to have traction. After this, my involvement in my own spiritual practices, then I felt that the quality of my prayers began to be better. And as time goes on, you develop a more mature sense of one's spirituality and religiosity. But it's not in the quantity of our emotions that is the measure of the maturity of our religiosity, but in the degree to which we are touched by the Holy Spirit, to the degree to which we are embodiments. And this is what Jesus Christ came to teach. He came to critique the fact that you could practice the law without having the spirit of the law. You can practice the mechanics of faith without having a genuine sincerity of faith. And what Jesus came to do, Jesus is regarded by Sufis, the Sheikh of the Sufis, completely, because his message, we believe that each prophet came with a signature. So Moses came to establish a law. Jesus came to establish the Spirit. Joseph came to teach dream interpretation. And David were kings, and Solomon were king, what you might say, the equivalent of the Greek of the philosopher king. They were prophet kings. And Muhammad came as the final prophet who was like in a final overture, combined all these aspects, the law, dream interpretation, spirituality, and to confirm and affirm the authenticity of all of these religions as being God's religion.
Shalom Aleinu, Eben Shalom Aleinu, Eben Shalom Aleinu, Mana Ashma Mitzvah.
First of all, I'd like to say that the narrative of our intentions was completely restated by those who were close to us. I'd like to remind you that I remember I've been Imam of a mosque in Tribeca, just 12 blocks north of Ground Zero, since 1983. This November will be 28 years that was Imam, and a member of this community in Lower Manhattan for more than a quarter of a century. Our plan, which I had this dream to build a Muslim version of the YWCA, to enhance relationships between our faith communities, to establish a center which I proposed to call the Cordoba House, that would be open to all members, that would have, you could be Christian, Jew, atheist, Muslim, you can be anything and be a member, just like the YWCA is a member, that would have various kinds of activities, athletic activities, swimming pool activities, etc. We're part of Tribeca, to be part of the Tribeca Film Festival, a cultural center. It was rebranded by the acquisition of the Ground Zero Mosque. When the news first developed, it broke the front page of the New York Times in December of 2009. There was no response at all. It wasn't until the midterm election season began, in May of 2010, that the opposition began. And I was interviewed by almost every television channel. And I explained it, people were satisfied. But the Fox News people were never satisfied. They came after me, they interviewed me 4 times within a week. They wanted me to come on again, and they came to my office. They kept repeating certain questions because they wanted a certain kind of an answer. It became very clear to me that I was a target of an anti-Muslim initiative that was deliberately trying to falsify, and they did falsify by calling the Ground Zero Mosque. That's wrong. We had, of course, the committee, we know the committee wanted these facilities. So we proposed this idea. They welcomed it. They voted unanimously in a number of the subcommittees. They were 5 times on this, and in the full board meeting, in spite of incredible hostility, they voted overwhelmingly by about 29 to 1 in favor. They saw this as their community center, and they resented the fact that there was this deliberately engineered attempt that was partly politicized, and our project was made a wedge issue because of the midterm elections. And the narrative became quite complicated, because I have devoted myself in my initiative, which I founded after 9/11, to improve U.S. Muslim or West Muslim relations, in particular U.S. Muslim relations. And I've been following the perception in the Arab and Muslim world. And what happened was, as the narrative came across the lever, it drew attention not only in America, but all over the world, especially the Muslim world. And I can tell you that the optics of the Jewish mayor of New York City, regarded in much of the Arab world as perhaps the largest, or one of the largest Jewish metropolis in the world, the Jewish mayor supporting a Ground Zero Mosque, it achieved so much positive, it created a positive stop button for America, for Jewish-Muslim relations, that it became a very complex issue for me to manage. And yet I have said, as I said, if someone will actually offer me another space, I will own the property. If someone will come and say, here is a space, I'll take it. No one has offered me a space. People have told me to declare that I will move, so I will be stateless or Muslim. But you know what? The more important question that the crisis precipitated is not about the piece of real estate. The more important question is how will America engage with Islam and Muslims who constitute about 23% of the world population, both domestically and internationally. This is an important question, far more important than this. And we have to look at the dynamics of what created this conflict, what created this thing. If it was an issue of midterm elections, then call it what it is. If it's about a deliberate attempt to get America to go to war against Islam, that is dangerous. Because, as I stated earlier, no political regime has ever succeeded in fighting religion, or any one religion. And we have, it is against all sensibility. It is against our geopolitical interests. We have bases, military bases in Bahrain and Qatar. We have bases in Turkey. We have many military bases in the Muslim world. We have oil interests. We have economic interests in the Muslim world. We have our national security interests in the Muslim world. If we don't engage in a wise way, it will impact us in many, many, many ways. It is not in our interest, neither is in the interest of global peace, for us to have this kind of attention. And no matter what I did, no matter what I explained, when I explained to people like yourself, which is why after the crisis developed, we did much more outreach to the 9/11 community. Because I was accused of being insensitive to the 9/11 community. And they're the ones who are the primary victims of 9/11. Which, by the way, we were too, because Muslims died in 9/11. My community was part of the 9/11 community. My own congregation were among the first responders to 9/11. So the trauma of 9/11 is something that me and my congregation, my lower middle community is part of. And our community recognizes that and embraces us as such. That's why they resented these outsiders coming in and telling us what our community should do, any more than you in Seattle would want New Yorkers to tell me what we should do here, even though we're both blue states. But when somebody, and the 9/11 family members, when they came, they talked to me and said, Imam Feisal, we have to go out and speak to America, which is why I'm here, and was in LA yesterday, and will be in Houston tomorrow. Because when people really hear from us and know what we're about and why we say and make this stand, we are loyal to America and we are loyal to our religion. I was invited by the FBI. I was invited by the FBI after 9/11 to speak to all 1,200 agents in New York City, to say how we, American Muslims, imams of our mosques, can cooperate with the law enforcement agencies to make sure that any kind of terrorism or attempts to inspire our youngsters with this so-called jihadism can be rooted out. And my track record is there, and it's open to everybody. And I've devoted myself to this. Yes, I've made some errors of statements here and there, but by and large, the interfaith community that I've worked with the American Jewish community. I was invited by David Rosen to the quarterly Board of Governors meeting in December of 2001 to speak on how we can improve Jewish-Muslim relations. I've worked with even Abe Foxman, who was troubled by our center. I've worked with all the members of the faith communities in New York City and other cities as well. I have devoted myself in many forums and think tanks both in the United States and overseas to see how it can improve U.S.-Muslim relations. So it has become very clear to me that whatever I do, and I've been under enormous pressure on both sides, those who say you have to stay, it's your constitutional right, you betray your supporters, to those who say move. At this point, it's still an open question. And if you are prepared to find me a property and say, here Imam Feisal is a property, I will take you up in a heartbeat. How's that?
Shalom Aleinu, Heaven Shalom Aleinu, Heaven Shalom Aleinu.
The term Muslim is used to mean a person who surrenders to God. In fact, the word Aslama means to surrender. And Abraham calls himself the first of those who surrender to God. In that sense, that's the core meaning of a Muslim. And the Prophet defined Islam as the 5 actions I just mentioned, bearing witness to God, conducting the daily prayer, being charitable, fasting, and performing pilgrimage as defining what Islam means. Unfortunately, in time, we human beings have created new terminologies and new words, and we have locked ourselves in these terms and ideas. For example, Jesus did not call himself a Christian. The name Christian was actually the Romans who called the followers of Jesus Christ Christianoi Antioch. This was where the beginning of the term Christian began. And I'm told that those who began to be called Christians said, we would love to be Christ-like, because Christian meant to be like Christ, of the Christ, Messiah, of a Messiah nature. The word Christ is the Greek term for Messiah, Messiah. So then in time, the word Christianity became reified, as William Campbell Smith says. It became what you might call a corporate entity, where people think they are now stockholders of this entity. And the same thing with Islam. Islam, instead of being a list of actions that Muslims do, now we talk about Islam as being a corporate entity that we're all somewhat citizens of, which is a false notion. And we even use terms like, what does Islam say? What does Islam think? As if Islam or Christianity is an ontologically real being that thinks and speaks. There's a danger in that. And the danger is that the assumption is that Islam cannot say more than one thing. Or Christianity has to say one thing. If you don't say this, you are therefore un-Islamic or outside the pale. And this is some of the dangerous mistakes that have actually crept into our way of thinking. And recently, in the last few decades, the term Islamist has been used to define those who, let's say, practice extremism or radicalism in Islamic vocabulary. What we really have to know, just to answer the previous question in a way, is that if you look at the substantive meaning of what people do, then we can break these barriers. They often tell Christian audiences, if you think of us Muslims as Unitarians with an Arabic liturgy,
journey on, though the night is dark and I am far from home. Thanks be to God, the morning light appears.
I had said I didn't want to make any remarks, but I feel so good about what's gone on here this weekend that I need to. Originally this happened because I was reading a lot about 20s Germany, and I thought, most of my life I've heard, where were the churches? And I thought, it's time to ask that question again. Where will the churches be? And that also means, where will the synagogues be? Where will I be? And to ask that question, I asked a few Muslim, Christian, and Jewish friends to be part of a steering committee. I want them to stand up because I have never worked with a committee with so little ego in it. Would you all stand up? You were incredible. If you helped out doing anything, stand up. And to everybody for being here and for what you will do when you go home and think about what happened here this weekend.
The storm is passing over. Hallelujah.